Sometimes the most important moments in life aren't the big dramatic scenes. They're the quiet ones you almost miss. For me, it was a conversation with my father on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, just 3 months before he died. I'm Sophie, and this is the story of how a simple USB drive exposed the truth about my greedy stepmother's scheme. My father, David Parker, was always a cautious man. As the owner of several successful real estate developments and a shrewd businessman, he understood the importance of planning ahead. What he didn't plan for was falling in love with Victoria, a woman 20 years his junior, after my mother passed away. I was already in college when they met, studying computer science and living in my own apartment. At first, Victoria seemed nice enough, always smiling, always complimenting Dad, always trying to include me in their plans. But something about her felt off. Maybe it was the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, or how she always steered conversations toward money and property. "Your father is such a successful man," she would say, examining the artwork in his office. "It must be wonderful, growing up with such security." Dad was too smitten to notice how her eyes lingered on his possessions, how she carefully documented everything of value. But I noticed. I noticed everything. They married after a whirlwind 6-month courtship. I tried to be happy for them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria had ulterior motives. Still, Dad seemed happy, and that's what mattered most. Then came that rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was visiting Dad at his office, helping him update some of his computer systems. Victoria was out of town visiting her sick aunt, though I later discovered she was actually meeting with a divorce lawyer to discuss her options. "Sophie," Dad said suddenly, looking up from his computer, "I need to show you something." He led me into his private study, a room Victoria wasn't allowed to enter. From his safe, he withdrew a thick envelope and a small USB drive. "I've been feeling uneasy lately," he admitted. "Some things aren't adding up with Victoria. Phone calls she doesn't want me to know about. Questions about my will and assets." My heart sank. So he had noticed after all. "I've made some arrangements," he continued. "But I need your help. You understand computers better than anyone I know." He explained his plan, and I listened carefully, my tech-savvy mind already working out the details. By the time I left his office that evening, the USB drive contained everything we needed: documents, recordings, and most importantly, a video message from Dad himself. 3 months later, Dad had a heart attack. The doctors said it was sudden, unexpected. But when I saw Victoria at the hospital, her grief seemed rehearsed, her tears too perfectly timed. The days following Dad's death were a blur of funeral arrangements and paperwork. Victoria took charge of everything, barely consulting me about any decisions. She even changed the locks on Dad's house, my childhood home, before his body was cold. "It's just for security," she explained with false sympathy. "I'm sure you understand." The will reading was scheduled for a week after the funeral. Victoria arranged for it to be held at Dad's favorite restaurant, in a private dining room. She invited several of her friends, all carefully selected witnesses to what she thought would be her moment of triumph. I arrived early, laptop in hand. Victoria was already there, dressed in expensive black designer clothes, playing the role of the grieving widow perfectly. "Oh, Sophie," she said loudly enough for others to hear. "How are you holding up, dear?" Before I could answer, Dad's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, arrived. He looked uncomfortable as he set up his briefcase, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Once all the invited guests were seated, Victoria nodded to Mr. Thompson to begin. I noticed she had positioned herself at the head of the table, like a queen about to receive her crown. "We're here for the reading of David Parker's last will and testament," Mr. Thompson began formally. Victoria straightened in her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and began reading. "I, David Parker, being of sound mind." But before he could continue, Victoria interrupted. "Perhaps we could skip to the relevant parts." She gave what she probably thought was a sympathetic look in my direction. "No need to drag this out and cause more pain." Mr. Thompson looked even more uncomfortable but complied. He flipped through several pages and then read, "I hereby leave all my property, assets, and holdings to my beloved wife, Victoria Parker." Victoria's smile widened as she looked around the table triumphantly. Her friends nodded approvingly. "Sophie, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I know this must be difficult for you, but your father wanted to make sure I was taken care of." I remained silent, carefully removing my laptop from its bag. "Of course," Victoria continued, warming to her theme. You're welcome to take any personal items you'd like from the house. After I've gone through everything, of course. We wouldn't want anything valuable to go missing." Her friends tittered appreciatively at her joke. "Actually," I said, speaking for the first time, "there's something everyone needs to see first." I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and turned the screen so everyone could see it. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "What's this about? The will reading is finished." "No," I said quietly. "It isn't." I pressed play, and suddenly my father's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his study, looking directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," he began, "then something has happened to me, and Victoria has tried to execute the will she forced me to sign 2 weeks ago." Victoria's face went pale. Her friends stopped smiling and began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm making this video to declare that will invalid," Dad continued. "I signed it under duress after Victoria threatened to expose certain business dealings to the IRS. Dealings that she herself had falsified documents about." The room was dead silent now. Victoria's hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass. "Sophie," Dad's voice continued, "remember that envelope I showed you? Mr. Thompson has the original, and you have the copy on this drive. It contains evidence of Victoria's attempts to blackmail me, including recordings of her phone conversations with her lawyer about forcing me to change my will." Mr. Thompson was already pulling an envelope from his briefcase, the same one Dad had shown me that rainy Tuesday. I also need to reveal that 2 months ago, I discovered Victoria had been slowly poisoning my blood pressure medication, replacing the contents with higher doses that would eventually cause a heart attack. Several of Victoria's friends gasped. She jumped to her feet. "This is ridiculous. He's lying. I demand we stop this right now. The evidence has already been turned over to the police," I said calmly. "They're probably at the house right now, collecting the medication bottles you thought you'd disposed of. The ones I replaced with duplicates after Dad showed me what you were doing." Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. One of her friends quickly moved to the other end of the table, away from her. "My real will," Dad continued from the screen, "is in Mr. Thompson's possession. It leaves the bulk of my estate to Sophie, with reasonable provisions for my staff and charitable donations. Victoria is to receive nothing. Mr. Thompson was already producing another document, the real will. Furthermore," Dad added, "the evidence of Victoria's attempts to kill me for my money has been documented and stored in multiple secure locations. Sophie knows what to do with it." Victoria made a dash for the door, but 2 police officers were already entering the room. They had been waiting outside, timing their entrance perfectly based on the video's length, another detail Dad and I had planned for. "Victoria Parker," one officer said, "you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." As they led her away, I could hear her screaming about how she would fight this, how her lawyers would destroy me. But the evidence was overwhelming. The USB drive contained not just Dad's video, but hundreds of documents. Recorded phone conversations, falsified medical records, even Victoria's own handwritten notes about Dad's medication schedule. Mr. Thompson proceeded to read the real will, but most of Victoria's friends had already slipped away, not wanting to be associated with what was quickly becoming a scandal. In the end, everything Dad had worked for was preserved. His properties remained intact, his business continued to thrive under my management, and his legacy was protected. Victoria, facing overwhelming evidence, eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges. She'll be in prison for a long time. The USB drive that changed everything sits in my desk drawer now, a reminder that sometimes the quietest weapons are the most powerful. Dad's video confession wasn't just about exposing Victoria's crimes. It was his way of protecting me one last time, using the very technology that had always connected us. Later that evening, after all the drama had died down, I sat in Dad's study, my study now, and played the video one more time. Past the part about Victoria, past the will declarations, to the very end where he had added a personal message just for me. "Sophie," he said, his eyes soft with love, "I'm so proud of you. You saw through Victoria's act from the beginning, but you didn't let your suspicions make you reckless. You waited, you watched, and you helped me gather evidence the right way. You're going to be fine, sweetheart. Better than fine. You're going to be extraordinary." Those words meant more to me than all the property and assets combined. They were my real inheritance, Dad's faith in me, his trust, his love. The aftermath of Victoria's arrest made headlines in our community. Some people criticized Dad for not exposing her sooner, but I understood his strategy. He needed ironclad evidence, and he needed to protect me from her potential retaliation. By planning everything so carefully, he ensured that justice would be served. Victoria's friends, those who had attended the will reading hoping to witness her triumph, quickly distanced themselves from her. Several even contacted me to share their suspicions about her behavior, though I noticed their concerns conveniently arose only after her arrest. The evidence Dad and I had gathered proved to be even more extensive than Victoria had imagined. The USB drive contained not just video and audio recordings, but detailed financial records showing how she had been preparing to strip Dad's estate bare after his death. She had already set up offshore accounts and made arrangements with shady art dealers to undervalue and quickly sell his collections. What she hadn't counted on was Dad's technological savvy, or rather, his wisdom in asking for my help. Every email she'd sent, every phone call she'd made, every document she'd prepared had been quietly monitored and recorded. The USB drive was just the tip of the iceberg. The police investigation revealed that Victoria had attempted similar schemes before, though never on this scale. She had a history of pursuing wealthy older men, though she'd usually moved on before implementing the darker parts of her plans. Dad was different. His wealth was too substantial for her to resist taking bigger risks. In the months following her arrest, I threw myself into learning every aspect of Dad's business empire. The real estate developments needed attention, and his other investments required careful management. It was challenging work, but it helped me feel close to him, understanding the legacy he'd built and trusted me to protect. 1 year after the will reading, I received a letter from Victoria's prison. She was requesting a meeting, claiming she wanted to apologize and make amends. I considered it briefly before feeding the letter into the shredder. Some things don't deserve a second chance. Dad's video message has become more than just evidence of Victoria's crimes. It's a reminder of his love, his foresight, and his trust in me. I've kept copies in multiple secure locations, just as he taught me. Not because they're still needed for legal purposes, but because I sometimes need to hear his voice, to be reminded of how he protected me even after he knew Victoria was trying to kill him. The study where we filmed that video is my favorite room in the house now. I've kept it exactly as it was, right down to the old computer where we first discovered Victoria's poisoning scheme. Sometimes when I'm working late, I can almost feel Dad's presence, guiding me, proud of how I've carried on his work. Victoria's trial was brief but intense. Her lawyers tried to claim the video was doctored, that Dad was mentally unstable, that I had somehow orchestrated the whole thing out of jealousy. But the evidence was too solid, too comprehensive. The USB drive contained not just Dad's video, but countless hours of Victoria's own words condemning her. The most satisfying moment came when they played the recording of her conversation with her divorce lawyer, recorded 2 months before Dad's death. Her own voice, calmly discussing how to accelerate the inheritance process through natural means, left no doubt about her intentions. She broke down on the stand when they showed the video footage I had secretly recorded of her replacing Dad's medication. The jury took less than 2 hours to find her guilty on all counts. The business community that had initially welcomed Victoria as Dad's charming young wife now regards me with a new respect. They've seen that I'm not just David Parker's daughter. I'm his true heir, in both intelligence and determination. Last week, I was reviewing some old files and found a document Dad had written years before he met Victoria. It was a letter to me, dated for my 30th birthday, talking about his hopes for my future and his faith in my abilities. He knew, even then, that I would be the one to carry on his legacy. "Sophie," he wrote, "you have something special, not just intelligence, but wisdom. You know how to wait, how to watch, how to plan. In business, as in life, those are the skills that matter most." The USB drive that exposed Victoria's crimes sits in my safe now, alongside that letter. Together, they tell the story of a father's love and a daughter's loyalty, of justice served through patience and planning. Victoria will be in prison for at least 15 more years. Her appeals have all been denied, the evidence against her too overwhelming to dispute. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about how thoroughly she was outplayed, not just by Dad, but by the quiet daughter she had dismissed as no threat. The company continues to grow under my leadership. I've expanded into new markets, always keeping Dad's principles of careful planning and patient strategy at the core of every decision. The employees who knew him say they see his wisdom in my management style, and that's the highest compliment I could receive. Dad's legacy isn't just in the properties he owned or the business he built. It's in the lessons he taught me. About being patient, being thorough, and most importantly, about being willing to protect what matters most. The USB drive that changed everything is more than just a piece of evidence now. It's a symbol of how love, combined with careful planning and technological expertise, can defeat even the most determined greed. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't strength or money or legal threats. It's simply the truth, carefully preserved and revealed at exactly the right moment. In the end, Victoria's scheme failed not because we were smarter or stronger, but because Dad understood something she never could. That true wealth isn't measured in properties or bank accounts, but in the bonds of trust between parent and child, in the quiet moments of planning and preparation, in the legacy of wisdom passed from one generation to the next. And that's something no amount of poison or fraud or legal maneuvering could ever destroy. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.